we are today in Brooklyn with our commissioner of the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection.
Right.
Commissioner Vilda Vera Mayuga.
Ah, you got it. You did it good.
It used to be the Department of Consumer Affairs.
That's right.
So when did they change it?
Yeah, so back in 2017, we started passing in New York City. The City Council passed certain worker protection laws specific to people who work in New York City. And we put that in the charter. A couple years later, it was put in the charter to make it part of the agency's name. So our focus would be not just on consumer protection, but also on worker protection. Actually, worker protection laws that we passed is for delivery workers, specific to those who deliver food that is ordered through a third-party app. So especially during COVID, I think we're all like staying at home very comfortably. I mean, most of us. And we really relied on the food to be delivered to us. So anytime, we realized that these workers are really essential workers. I mean, especially the pandemic proved that to be true. And so we wanted to make sure that they really receive the protections and the dignity that they deserve as essential workers.
And you said you met your husband here, and it's also fun.
We met here, so that's the other thing, right? New York City, beautiful place, lots of communities.
He grow up?
He grew up in Eastern Washington.
Okay.
State.
Wow.
So very far.
Wow.
But we both ended up in New York City.
Okay.
I first lived in Queens, and he also lived in Queens, and he claims that, coming to America movie, he came to Queens to find his queen.
Where in New York can one find a woman with grace, elegance, taste, and culture? A woman suitable for a king? Queens!
And yes, and we have our two kids that I shared before. We call them Filoricans, Filipino and Puerto Rican, and very proud, show them the different cultures, not just our own, but in New York City, and try to expose them to everything that there is over here.
Tell us how you got into this type of work.
Oh my goodness. I think it goes back to going to law school, I'm here in Puerto Rico. And
It's very loud on this one.
I know, we gotta scream. I always wanted to know my rights, because I always felt like if I didn't know my rights, somebody was gonna take advantage of me.
Okay.
And just take me for a fool or something like that. So I always, personally and for my family and friends, I wanted to make sure that I knew where to find the information, what was the right information, so that I could ask confidently questions and get what I needed. And so that's sort of like the trajectory. I, came to government, and I love having that seat at the table, being a woman of color, just bringing that perspective of our communities that are not always represented in making those decisions, and keeping it real, right? I mean, it's sometimes just making assumptions as to what works for people, but I'd rather not do that. I don't want to stay behind a desk and trying to guess what people need or what's the issue, right? What's the problem? Just asking direct with the communities and finding out what is the problem, why is something not working, so that we can address it properly and in a way that makes sense.
Well, it's confusing. So when you talk about worker rights, it's so great to hear that so many people came to the hearing, but how does the average person find out about what is going on in government and what their rights are?
Listen, I think there's a lot of relying on social media, so government got in that too, and now we have social media accounts as well, and we push out a lot of information that way. So I would suggest, following us on Facebook, Twitter. You could go to a website if you want more detail, because that's where you're going to have more detail. But that's really the way we're pushing out the information. Social media. So just follow us there. If you send us a message through Facebook and Twitter, we'll respond also and reach out and answer questions. You can also call 311. I think I'm one who was kind of hesitant in the beginning with 311, but it actually works.